นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. As we know, one of the most famous teachings in Buddhism is Yawada Patimokkha. Abandon evil, cultivate the good, purify your mind. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. So where does that come from? It comes from the enlightened mind or awakened mind of the Buddha. And this process of awakening to the truth that comes about as we practice, particularly developing mindfulness and insight, looking back at this body and mind, we come to notice certain things. One is that, why do we abandon evil? Because unwholesome mental states, which is what in Buddhism evil means, doesn't necessarily mean all the most extreme kinds of negative behavior and mental states, but can even mean just the most subtlest kind of greed or anger or delusion. But what we call unwholesome mental states agitate the mind. That's why we make an effort to abandon them. Because nobody in their right mind likes mental agitation. It's not peaceful. Happiness is not the same as mental agitation. So the Buddha encouraged us to abandon mental states rooted in greed, anger, and delusion, or what we call abandoning evil. Cultivating good is cultivating the opposites, cultivating wholesome states of mind, putting effort into that, understanding what are wholesome states of mind, putting effort into developing them. Why? Because wholesome states of mind bring with them a good feeling, literally. The technical term is somanassa, happiness of mind. And happiness because of the non-agitating nature of wholesome mental states. So greed agitates the mind, moves the mind, fills the mind up with thoughts about whatever it is you're greedy for. So it can be very subtle desire just for some sense stimulation, to see something attractive, beautiful, desirable. Or it could be full-on greed that might lead you to attack another person to get what they've got for yourself. It might lead you to do something very extreme. So just the mental state of greed has varying degrees. Whereas the opposite, contentment, doesn't agitate the mind, doesn't lead you to attack other people, doesn't lead the mind into mental movement and proliferation. So the Buddha was teaching based on his understanding of the human mind, that there are these differences, these mental states that agitate, disturb, and we would say lead to suffering. Mental states that are skillful and lead to peace of mind and non-proliferation. And you see this perhaps most clearly when you're meditating, but not only when you're meditating. But when we're meditating, we tend to be putting most effort into observing our mind and training the mind. You'll notice as soon as you lose your awareness, your mindfulness, the mind begins getting lost into thought again. Just one moment loss of concentration. So if you're practicing mindfulness of breathing, one moment you let your mind drift away from the breath, and the mental proliferation begins, the agitation begins. So of course it could be just a few seconds of agitation as you start to think of something. Or it could be half an hour caught up in some very strong emotional reaction to something that seems unstoppable at that moment, at that time. And then everything in between. As you practice mindfulness directed to the breath, coming back to the in and out breath over and over again, of course your mindfulness mental muscle will improve, get stronger. As you become more patient and your mind and body become used to the stillness and bringing up mindfulness, awareness, then the moments where you're lost in the mental proliferation, distraction or sleepiness reduce. It may reduce right down to just a few seconds where you're watching the in-breath and the out-breath. And your mind begins to form a thought. And you see it, you catch it at that moment. You may not even know exactly what you're going to think about. But having practiced already, maybe, and contemplated what's going on in your mind, you know that pretty much whatever you think of doesn't matter at that point. So you can allow yourself to let it go. Even before the train of thought is properly formed. It's a bit like when you're in situation with other people and you're about to speak, so maybe you raise your eyebrows and you open your mouth, but then you think better, oh, perhaps I won't say this. About to speak, but then you stop for whatever reason. As you're meditating on the breath, you're about to think, but then you stop. Because you know it will just lead to another loss of mindfulness, a distraction. Of course, if the thing that prompts you to start thinking could be old karma, just memory, habit coming up, or it could be external stimulation, seeing, hearing something, sensing something in your body. If the stimulation is strong, even though you don't want to think, you'll start thinking. It's stronger than your mindfulness. But if you've seen that before, you know it just will pull your mind away for a while, and you'll think going round in circles, going here, going there, what we call mental proliferation for a while. And then it will just fade out and you'll realise, well, that was a waste of time. I didn't need to think that. It wasn't that important. Only then you come back to the breath. But of course you've expended some energy on that train of thought. It may even lead you to a little bit of disappointment with yourself or losing mindfulness. You feel a bit tireder. So if it keeps happening, it sort of undermines your effort in your practice. Maybe in the end you just give up. You say, oh, tonight it's not working. But when mindfulness is sharp and strong, and you have some wisdom guiding you at that time, maybe all you need to do is just, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. So the thought is just coming up, the movement of the mind is just beginning. But you straight away let it go and return to the breath, or stay with the breath. And maintain your mindfulness, your concentration, your effort. And each time you do that, you might find you actually get more energy in the practice. Mind gets brighter. Mindfulness more continuous. The breath itself becomes more interesting, more absorbing. So it goes in the other direction. And whereas the mental proliferation tends to distract us, tire us out, lead us to give up, the presence of mindfulness, right effort, and then concentration, stillness of mind, brings up a lot of positive energy, makes you more enthusiastic, more interested in what you're doing. And then you keep going. And this is why practicing mindfulness is always accompanied in the Buddhist path by right effort, in the effort to prevent unwholesome states from arising, the effort to abandon them if they have arisen, the best effort to bring up wholesome states of mind, and the effort to develop them, cultivate them further. And that's always accompanied by right view, wisdom. You know why it's worth doing, you have a sense that this is something worthwhile, useful. And through experience you also know what is wholesome, what is unwholesome. So often we're deluded by our own thoughts. They trick us into thinking again about that thing that you've thought 1,000 times before that really is not necessary to think about. But still they fool us into yet again thinking. And accompanied by the thinking, there's this mental movement and proliferation, distraction, agitation. This is why practicing meditation is so practicing regularly is so important. Because you get to understand this point more and more, and you become sharper in seeing and knowing your own mind and then letting go. Get better at it. And as you get better at it, it becomes more effortless, easier. You notice when you begin meditation, it always seems difficult because of the pressure coming from all this accumulated craving and attachment, thinking, worrying, attaching, desiring, wanting. There's a lot of mental pressure there. And bringing up mindfulness is going against the flow of that. So we say going against the flow, going against the stream. Just like walking against the stream in the sea or in a river. It's hard work. But if you keep practicing, it becomes more effortless. Partly because your mindfulness improves, partly because your identification with those ways of thinking and the self-investment starts to drop away. You don't feed them so much. And it becomes more enjoyable. It's actually more enjoyable to let go. More enjoyable than holding on. Sometimes we also have to help us along in the practice. So if it's really not working, say if you're practicing mindfulness of breathing, it's really not happening, your mind just can't stay with the breath, well, sometimes you do need to develop a different theme of meditation that will hold your attention better. I was talking earlier about Chakkanusati, recollection of the generosity you've practiced. Silanusati, recollection of the sila you've kept. If you've kept the 5 precepts for a day and a night, that's already something very special. What leads you to keep precepts is the qualities of hiriyottappa, shame, fear of wrongdoing. These are qualities that protect you and protect everyone around you, called the guardians of the world. Even if your mind is not yet very peaceful in meditation, you're finding it too hard to stay with the breath. These kind of recollections perhaps are easier. Recollect the generosity you practice to help you given to others, the sila you've kept. Or recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. These all help the mind to settle down perhaps and become a little bit more enthusiastic. They take our attention better than the breath, which is a very subtle object. If we can't find the breath or the feeling, then one of these other objects may do the job. Or sometimes just recollecting the perception of impermanence, as we just chanted. All conditions are impermanent. Body and mind, physical and mental conditions are impermanent. And just keep directing your mind to impermanence, to seeing, observing impermanence. And at first you may just think about it, so you have to accept you're still thinking, not yet fully mindful from moment to moment, but you introduce the theme of impermanence and keep coming back to it. And because it's a theme of Dhamma, it's bringing your mind closer to the truth. So if you keep reflecting on the impermanence of your thoughts, you will notice, thoughts do come and go. They arise, they cease. And that can help you to let them go. sensations in the body, that maybe you have a painful feeling somewhere that keeps disturbing you, pulling your attention. We introduce the recollection of impermanence directed to that painful sensation or feeling. Ask yourself, how long does it last? Is it completely unchanging, this pain in my back or my leg or wherever it is? Is it always the same feeling, or does it get more intense or less intense? So recollection of impermanence can involve questioning, but you keep your mind within a theme, which helps to settle the mind. It can't stay with the breath, but maybe it can stay within the theme of impermanence. And you use your mental ability to put attention on the painful feeling and get to know it as Dhamma, just the way things are. There's a particular feeling, but to see it without getting lost in your reaction to it, the aversion, the agitation of mind. And we can use the recollection of impermanence with everything, with memories as they come up into the mind. So, oh yeah, it's just a memory. It comes and goes. With thoughts, with feelings, physical feelings, or even mental feelings, which are more suffering, more subtle. They're subtle peace, subtle agitation, deep feelings of peace, profound feelings of happiness, or deep feelings of suffering and pain, mental pain. But observing how they're impermanent, they're changing. We can look at our sensory experience, seeing. In one moment you're focused on the seeing. Maybe there's something to keep your attention. Hearing, tasting, smelling, touching. But keeping the recollection of impermanence, change in mind as you do that. So rather than getting so caught up in the details of what you're seeing, which tend to lead on to desire, either liking or disliking, just sticking with the fact that the seeing is arising and ceasing. The hearing, the tasting, the smelling, the touching. Just in the same way as you can do this with thinking. Everything is arising and ceasing in your experience. And if you keep recollecting this, then that becomes another habit of mind, but your mind becomes more familiar with the theme of impermanence. You go back to it over and over again. You'll naturally notice things as impermanent, or the impermanent aspect of experience. Becoming so familiar that it doesn't bother you, because you know that's just the way things are. Emotions come and go, thoughts come and go, memories arise and cease. Feelings of pleasure, feelings of pain arise and cease. That's just the way they are. So if you become more familiar, say, with the recollection of impermanence, you don't have to imagine it or think about it so much anymore. You're just noticing it or witnessing it. And this is why it can lead on to the mind calming down and becoming peaceful in samadhi. Because if you keep noticing the impermanence of things, your mind naturally doesn't cling on or identify so strongly with them. It may begin as a discursive meditation, thinking, oh, this is impermanent, that doesn't last, look at this arising, ceasing, but you keep doing it. After a while you're just witnessing the arising and ceasing rather than thinking about it. So your mind comes closer and closer to the present moment and is caught less and less into proliferation. Maybe you even become a little bolder. You can say, well, what is permanent? Where is there anything that's permanent? And look around and you realize everything you take as permanent is actually not permanent. If you don't know where to start, we'll just come to physical things, physical objects. So it's on the outside. Just anything you can think of, is it permanent? Does it last? And the answer would be no, everything is changing. Things in nature, things we build or create, material things we obtain, produce, nothing lasts. You keep doing it with external objects, gets to the point where you just see the impermanence as soon as you experience that thing, see it, know it. And as Lumpur Cha used to say, the cup is already broken. And it saves you so much suffering because you know, oh, things are impermanent. And when that is displayed, you witness it, you're at ease with the truth. This is why recollecting impermanence can lead on to states of calm, samadhi, because you're just knowing with ease, with comfort, the way things are. Maybe when things do break down on you or break, you can cope with it because you know everything is impermanent. Rather than dwelling on the suffering of the experience, I wish it wasn't like that. I wish I had my thing back, whatever the thing was. If you become familiar with this practice, it gets to the point where just whatever happens, you know it's just impermanent. It arises, ceases. Your mind doesn't make a whole lot out of it. Doesn't give a lot of importance to it. It's not that you don't understand things or don't know things, you're not aware of things, but you just don't grasp onto things because you know they're impermanent. So as Ajahn Chah said, the cup is already broken. Well, this body is ultimately, he compared it to a block of ice or an ice cube. It's melting over time, starts off big, solid, eventually it will just melt away and there'll be nothing left. So seeing it in impermanence in external things, and you bring that reflection inside to your body, your mind. Until it's just, you might say, intuitive or second nature, just to see the impermanence. Things arise into your experience, but they're impermanent, they don't last. That's their nature, they change, they arise, they pass away. If it's the body, well, look at it, question it. Which bit of your body will last? In the end, nothing lasts because we die. Even while we're alive, nothing remains unchanged. Every moment we breathe in, we breathe out. The heart beats, pumps the blood around the body. Blood is being produced. Blood cells are dying. We eat food, we digest food. We go to the toilet, we feel hot, we feel cold. Contemplating impermanence over and over again, bringing the mind inwards. So whether it's internal sensations, thoughts or feelings, they're all impermanent. What's left is the recollection of impermanence, filling the mind more than the object or the details of whatever it is that we're involved with. So even reflecting on, say, the aging process or the sickness of your body, or even the eventual death of this body, the mind is at ease with that because you know, it's impermanent. There's no way it can be any other way. It can't be any other way. Can't be anything else. This is why Luang Por Chah had a couple of skeletons in his meditation hall, and they're still there today. You walk into the meditation hall, what draws your eyes? Well, first is the Buddha. Even Buddha statues are impermanent. Secondly, it will be the skeleton hanging up in a glass case. So everyone in this world is a walking teaching of impermanence. And Ajahn Chah said, practice until you see the skeleton walking around in other people or in yourself. If we didn't have a skeleton, the skin, the flesh would just collapse on the ground if you took everyone's skeleton away. It's what allows us to stand up and walk around. You couldn't sit in meditation if you didn't have a skeleton. There'd be nothing to hold your body together. Couldn't do yoga, couldn't do anything that you use your body for if you didn't have a skeleton. So it's an essential part of the body, but it's a sign of impermanence. Because when you die, the skin, the flesh disappears, and it'll be the skeleton that's left. Eventually that will go and become earth. What's our usual reaction when you see a skeleton? You usually have fear or loathing. Many people see a skeleton and they immediately feel uncomfortable because it reminds them of death, reminds them of horror movies, ghosts, everything they don't like. Some people see a skeleton and they go to the monastery, see a skeleton and they come away. They can't sleep at night thinking about a skeleton. Maybe they think of ghosts, think something's going to happen, something bad is going to happen. Really, a skeleton is just a sign of impermanence and is a sign of what's there in the human body. And there's no one in the world who doesn't have a skeleton. Male, female, young, old, beautiful, ugly, everyone has a skeleton. But what we tend to stick with is the reaction, the emotional reaction. I don't like it, I'm afraid of it, don't want it. That's how Ajahn Chah used to test people who wanted to come and practice as a monk in the monastery. First few nights, say they had to sleep in the meditation hall next to the skeleton. Some people wouldn't sleep the whole night because of the fear. If you look at it as Dhamma, it's just teaching you everything is impermanent. When I was a junior monk, we stayed in one monastery and they'd have corpses laid out. When villagers died who had no relatives, they'd be brought into the forest and just laid out in a shallow grave, open grave, so that the monks could contemplate impermanence. You'd see all the hair drop out from the body, the clothes would gradually turn to rags with the rain, the sun, and maybe animals come along and tear at the clothes, so the clothes gradually disappeared. The skin dries out, all the internal organs get smelly and rotten, but then they dry out, disappear. So you'd be left with the skeleton. And eventually even the skeleton would collapse and animals would take bits and pieces away and there'd be nothing left in the end. Even without trying, you can't, if you see that every day, you can't help but realize that the human body is impermanent. But when you look at people, you're not usually seeing impermanence. You're seeing this person who you like, or this person who you don't like, male, female, someone you know, or they're a stranger, looking at their clothes, who they are, their dress, looking at their behavior, whether they behave in a way you like or you don't like. We don't see impermanence when we look at other people normally. Unless you haven't seen someone for a few years, and then you probably say, "Oh, you look old." I get that these days. People I haven't seen for 10 years, they go, "Oh, Ajahn, all your hair is white." Or you don't look young like you used to. Even then, people are probably not seeing it as impermanent, they're just seeing whether they like it or not. If you reflect on impermanence every day, every time you meditate, that becomes what you notice, the impermanence, the change. In the world around you, in yourself, it becomes a teacher. It's one way you can develop states of calm, samadhi, just reflecting on impermanence till that's what you're noticing. So then nothing takes your mind away from the present moment. When we maintain mindfulness in the present moment, we're just seeing arising and ceasing. One breath in, one breath out. A sound arises, ceases. Sights arise and cease. Thoughts arise and cease. Your mind is totally at ease and comfortable with that, just knowing that's the way things are. And with that, knowing the way things are, more and more there's a sense of separation between the mind that knows and the object. So even your own body, you can see it's not really a person or a being. It's a collection of elements. There's just a knowing that these elements, they come together for a while and then eventually they get old, get sick and die and go back to nature. There's this sense of separation between the mind and the body. The mind and feelings, the mind and memories, the mind and thoughts, the mind and sense consciousness. As you meditate, of course, there'll be some times where it is a little bit frightening, but not in the way of watching a horror movie or something. It's more frightening just realizing that there's nothing your mind can settle on that's permanent. There's nowhere that the mind can alight other than in the knowledge that everything is impermanent. That, at first, that is frightening or unsettling. It's like you've got nothing left. But as the mind looks deeper and becomes more peaceful, you realize that's liberating. You don't have to grasp onto anything as belonging to you, because it doesn't belong to you. But you know the truth, so you're not deluded, and then you don't get afraid. So there's many ways to make the mind peaceful. Some come through developing insight into impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. Sometimes recollecting very wholesome aspects of the practice, like generosity, or sila, kindness, compassion, recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. Or just going to your main meditation object, if that's the breath, just going to the breath. They're all good if they bring your mindfulness up, help your mind to become calm, steady. Then you can see the truth of the way things are. So maybe I'll leave you with those reflections tonight.